When the rain has had its torrent and thunder has chased every bright white bolt of flashing electricity, then calm ascends as the white curtains part, uncovering a vibrant blue sky, one that calls us to venture out, to move onward and upward to our highest calling and purpose, to explore furthermore. The clouds have lifted, and in that clarity, we come to know the calm of the storm. It was always me, a terrifying and sobering truth I had to face head on before I could find the real freedom found in strong-willed self-control by overcoming its counterfeit willfulness. When my fog of blame, denial, and deflection lifted, what remained was crystal clarity. In that sober moment of honest reflection, the accumulated consequences of willful blindness became the insight that led me to truth. I came to know that my life was most governed by all those decisions and choices. Even worse, the lack of ownership thereof. Willful, angry, determined, most often weak-willed, unable to say no when it mattered most to protect myself. To wake to our truth is the moment we move into our authentic life, into healing and flourishing health, a realization that a whole and joyful life can only be lived if one will radically own it. All of it, the success, the failure, the abuse, the trauma, the psychosis, the brokenness, the depression, and the mania of bipolarity. This is my story about my light hidden under the bushel of stigma while always hiding in plain sight. I do not share for glory or grandeur, only to show what many will see and still not understand. Yet I have lived for over 20 years, the landscape of a bipolar mind. Now we clearly see we are laid victim to ourselves, the consequences of our own selfish willfulness that injures us more than we'd like to acknowledge, those self-imposed expectations and weak-willed bargaining surrenders. When we were not able to make the necessary strong-willed choice of abandonment, of letting go, actually surrendering our willfulness for the gift of self-control, of letting it be. It was always me. For many years, my traumas came from self-abuse, not survivorship. A life lived without limits, without restraint, to fiend after pleasure without concern for the collateral costs. Anything to fill the vacancy, the void inside, without resolve to accept life and the reality of limits. Not merely those we accept, but those we intentionally set in protection and self-love. Over the years, I created the archetype of a storm as I had survived a hurricane as a child. While the paradigm of life as a storm is hell to persevere, it soothed me as it kills any silence where the pain of self-reflection might creep in. My storm kept me from being still long enough to face everything I was running from by running to the next. The cycles were really avoidance of the pain and deprived me of my much need for stillness to heal. For me, issues with abandonment and neglect in my childhood had led to a maladaptive drive to be needed even at the risk of being taken advantage of mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually. These acquired, unhealed, and unforgiven injuries create pain that manifest as frustration and anger. They had become encoded into my psyche as reality. There wasn't a need to question. For me, I embraced the stimulus and thrill of risk-taking spawned from learning a lack of self-preservation. I'd gladly trade safety and security, a foreign and uncomfortable currency, in exchange for the promise of validation, a chase and thirst for unrequited love, always just out of reach. This pursuit of conditional love, perhaps by some unconscious plan, allowed me to continue my seeking to fulfill the empty wanting. This learned maladaptive motive to seek for care and caretaking without having any model of safe and secure relationships. Instead, reactivity and reaction overruled any measured responses without any constraints, ignorant of the requisite reflexivity, extinguishing both consideration or introspection, leaving only chaotic unpredictability, creating an ingrained caution and an ever-set guard. Being predictably unpredictable is the basis for lost trust, as the randomness of behavior cannot allow for stable connection and has destroyed relationships. We make ourselves powerless when we choose not to know, but we give ourselves hope when we insist on looking. The very fact that willful blindness is willed, that it is a product of a rich mix of experience, knowledge, thinking, neurons, and neuroses, is what gives us the capacity to change it. Like Lear, we can learn to see better, not just because our brain changes, but because we do. As all wisdom does, seeing starts with simple questions. What could I know? Should I know that I don't know? Just, what am I missing here? As a child in Texas, one of my earliest memories was of the spiral staircase in our home. It was lost to memory as a hurricane destroyed our home. It was my first lesson in impermanence. By an act of God, we sheltered in place and took a direct hit. The symbols of cycles and spirals have been carried from the survival of that shock trauma. When the storm passed, the sun emerged, and the world was unrecognizable. A pilot boat lay in our backyard, ejected from the deep water channel like a child's toy splashed from the tub. In that moment, and over the days exploring the chaotic landscape with my pet dog, Sam, I was indelibly marked a survivor with a lifelong journey of loss that has become the beauty of impermanence. For all things come to pass away. This is the great mystery of life, understood only as the counterpoint of death. We need loss to know gain, sorrow to know joy, death to know life, darkness to know light. What is the opposing force to love? Nothing, for love conquers all. Love is the distilled essence of courage, hope, and miracles, a strong-willed conviction to stand on behalf of another. No matter the circumstances, it calls us to ever higher ground. Realism works for those living stable realities, safe ones, sane ones. When reality is warm, comforting, and nurturing, it's easy to stay. But for the abused, neglected, and abandoned, reality is painful, fearful, and anxiety-ridden. It's terrifying, scary, and unsafe. Thus, we run from the environment, or we fight for survival, even if fighting is not warranted. We fight to be seen, heard, and honestly felt. The irony is in this turmoil and conflict, we are often murdering what we most seek, loving kindness. So we impulsively run in many ways to drugs, alcohol, sex, self-injury of all kinds. We come to fight ourselves. We can run to the temporary relief of compulsions and obsessions. We can run to the end of hope and fall, even jump into the abyss of depression and suicide, because even ending up down and out, at least it is away from where we can't find sanctuary and connection. And so running can bring us to exuberant idealism as a form of comforting denial, a maladaptive view of false possibilities that is distorted in a lens of perfection, a begging hope that if hell on earth exists, then perhaps through the panacea of perfect achievement, we might bring utopia. But it simply isn't real. At the end of this exhaustion is isolation. We end up alone. And here, if we can boldly face ourselves and the reality we have made, then perhaps we can learn to calm the storm within. What is left in the passing moment is our reality, if we can accept it. Required to navigate our truth is honesty and courage to see what has really happened, the consequences of choices from others and oneself. Thus, to reach the moment when reflection forms wisdom through new awareness, we create new insight that once accepted becomes realized truth. Ironically, through this learning can be brought to reality, to life through action, our behavior. Yes, action makes truth real in our life. No more lies, no more avoiding, no more inability to pause, reflect, look back, take inventory, accept loss and pain. No more blame, no more deflection. Finally, we sit in a pregnant readiness to change and heal. Yet the healing process is painful and scary as it is bound in more intentional time with anxious waiting, as we never know the outcome of how we might heal, and so that very process of freedom through healing is reminiscent of the environment we seek to escape, fearful uncertainty. And so again, we do what we know. We relapse into the run, we grasp for the familiar, even the poison that kills us. For it is known and certain. The calm to all these storms is parabled biblically as, "Be still and know that I am God." That is the magic, the domain of miracle making of all types. Be still. Surrender our will and move toward abandonment, to allow presence, to see the futility of all the imagined and narrated versions that are no more than mythologies such as daydreams and bedtime stories. Some we fill with fear and tension, and others we overcome against all odds. Yet all these heroes' journeys are at best approximations to the richness of anyone's given lived reality, of which there are no words to express for the human experience as it is unbounded to the language we use to interpret and describe. We have no words for the worlds of emotions and flows of those sensory cascades that transpire from womb to grave. Might we ever know that such intensities are truly shared by others in ways that cannot be described, but only shared in a word: intimacy. Intimacy is that moment of existence when our inner haciendas are fully opened, shared beyond the garish gates, thorned and gated windows, away from the barren street of cobblestones. When we unlock those self-imposed limits and enter into the shared courtyard, lush and beautiful, we find there an inner presence that few have the privilege to access. Oh, but to know that intimacy, to settle into the space we call home, the presence of being fully in your skin and yet also within, penetrating to a warmth of inner sanctum, actually within and accepted there to stay, for no reason other than the sheer exhilaration of pleasure in finding our soul suspended for an eternity in a lapsed moment. Then we are conductive ready for the flow of power to enter and depart, unabated by our demands of willfulness. We are lightning rods that respond to any magnitude of power, so long as we permit it to pass through and flow, and not to be deviated in any way. Immense power flows through us beyond even the power of lightning at the core of the universe, is teeming energetic flows occurring beyond our body and mind, yet enfolded by that very consciousness. A paradox, awareness, births reality, yet we so quickly fail the mindfulness necessary to observe the unfolding of reality in real time. Our failure of presence in remembrances and desires. We must come to love as we are, for there is nothing else we might bring. Nothing of past nor future is real communion. Nothing but as we are now available, broken, and in process flowing and becoming, let us desire each other in the lust of the shared moment. In the suffering and pain, be still. Simply surrender. Running will get you back to where you began, an eternal Mobius loop. Staying patient in the storm gives us a level head to deal with the reality as it is. Not how we desire, dream, hope, demand, or bargain for. We make peace that we can't renegotiate life's terms. It's a hard bargain. It's intention and grace that lead us to reconciliation both within ourselves and with others. If we run, let it be into each other's arms and into community, and even courageously into burning buildings to save the sanctity of life, an expression of our love for one another. We must love ourselves, even where others have failed us. We must stop harming ourselves with repetition, expecting difference. We must come to love others in ways we never receive. This is then victory over all losses, trials, and tribulations, because we now walk alongside another with compassion, with deep understanding. We can again care for more than what we have lost along the way. This becomes our walk. Life is no longer a run. It passes by so quickly. What does running profit you? A sooner demise. Tomorrow is another day, but this moment is the only reality. The past is a distorted blur reinterpreted and the future unrealized until passing through us. So we must hold presence, be present, breathe, inhale, exhale, be calm the storm within.